It's been a strange couple of weeks, hell, even months for Call of Duty. And it's about to get a little bit weirder thanks to the lovely world of data protection laws. And Call of Duty, much like most other modern companies, is now required to hand over certain data when asked to do so. And that's what we're going to be talking about in this video today. But before we delve into all of that, it's been a strange couple of months for Call of Duty. On Steam, the game has managed to lose all of the players that it had gained over the release of Black Ops 6. And this time last year, in January of 2024, they had around 89,000 players. Now they're down to 82,000. The game actually peaked up to 100k over that period in 2023. It peaked up to 165,000 in November and has already plummeted to half of that player count. The Steam charts obviously don't tell the full story. There's Game Pass, there's people playing on Battle.net, and on top of all of that, you've also got the fact that this game is still second for both PlayStation and Xbox globally in terms of the most purchased titles. But all of the discourse surrounding Call of Duty has come to a grinding halt. Black Ops 6 had a phenomenal launch. It was a decent multiplayer, granted with some iffy maps, a pretty great zombies experience, and people were generally excited for what Black Ops 6 Warzone had to offer. But all of it fell off a cliff. I mean, the game has been in a really tough spot, and just to name a few of the issues right now, ranked play on both Warzone and Black Ops 6 is pretty much unplayable. Hackers are capable of DDoSing servers. As of the most recent Squid Game update, Call of Duty actually crashes fairly frequently on PC now. I've had 3 or 4 crashes today alone in a 4-hour session. And that's before we even start talking about, more stuff that's in the game, like the meta situation, the XM4 that existed and persisted for far too long that kind of feels like the RPK meta from Modern Warfare 2. Any positive sentiment and goodwill that Call of Duty had gained has pretty much fallen off a cliff, and the solution that they have, as far as we can see, is kicking the can down the road. You see, Call of Duty is like an ex-girlfriend that you don't want to talk to. You got rid of them in around December or January and claimed that they just weren't good enough, and then come around February or March, they'll claim that they can change and definitely release more updates to make things better. And just like the sky being up, in what I assume is the 3rd year in a row now, Call of Duty has issued statements saying that things will improve and they have updates on the way to deal with lots of issues that they themselves have produced. They did the same with Modern Warfare 3, they did the same with Modern Warfare 2, and they're back again doing it in Black Ops 6. They claim that there will be anti-cheat updates and server protections going live in Season 2 and Season 3, continuing the monumental trend of kicking the can as far down the road as they humanly can, and not actually making any tangible change. And as long as no new titles come out of the woodwork to take players away from them, chances are Call of Duty, despite probably having a very large player retention problem, is probably okay with that, because they know that by the time they release the game next year, people are going to forget about all of the issues that persisted this year. Although I feel like that's starting to change, and that narrative of just forgetting these issues has started to vanish. It's been very prevalent that the fatigue that we've seen, especially in Warzone, has reached an all-time high. Undoubtedly, one of the biggest conversations surrounding Call of Duty is skill-based matchmaking, and this is a fairly detailed and nuanced discussion that I think lots of people tend to glaze over. And for me, skill-based matchmaking is both an evil, but sometimes a necessary evil. As you've seen in pretty much most other titles that aim to keep players playing, the idea of them getting dunked on constantly in a random-based matchmaking system, it doesn't tend to go well. And there are numbers and figures to back that up. But the interesting thing about Call of Duty's skill-based matchmaking is that they're not very transparent about it, or at least historically they haven't been. They've shut down entire websites and entire API data points in their servers to stop players from seeing the kind of lobbies that they have been put into. There have been numerous instances in the past of companies being told that they have to close, and numerous instances of them just straight up taking out an entire accessible API for their game to stop people figuring out what's going on. They have started releasing matchmaking white papers, which do explain some of the rationale and reasoning behind what they do, and whilst I do disagree with how they come to some of their conclusions, there's no denying that this is probably the most transparent they've ever been about these systems. The fact that they feel the need to speak about them, though, probably alludes to the fact that the public sentiment surrounding them is so negative that they felt like they had to say something. This led to a really good find by TheXclusiveAce, and I am going to credit him for this because I honestly don't think this would have cropped up had he not noticed it, or at least somebody alerted him to it and he spread awareness around it, which involves the ability to request your data from Activision, as well as any withstanding data that they have on your accounts. And anybody can do this, and you don't have to have some sort of special privileges. Now, the exclusive ace went through this process and decided to request his data from the company and found that he could actually see the physical skill value that they had applied to his account and actually track the data in alignment with his KD, which means for the first time ever, somebody like the exclusive ace or somebody like you or even me can now see how Call of Duty vaguely views us in terms of our skill data. And as a matter of fact, once this was revealed, so many people attempted to do it that the actual website in charge of all of this completely caved in and failed. It really is quite impressive just how much the average Joe is interested in how skill-based matchmaking works, because an entire segment of Activision's website came to a grinding halt. Most modern 21st century countries do have to have some kind of data protection laws that may entitle them to retrieve data from companies at any given occasion. And as a result of that, this was likely just a framework website that existed to comply with those laws. And chances are, if it applies to one big country or one big region, say the European Union, you may as well just have it universally accessible to everybody. So for the first time since Call of Duty took down various skill-based matchmaking websites of the past, you can now actually see the skill value that has been attributed to your account. Now, granted, there's lots of context missing here. The number appears to be somewhere around the 300s for the exclusive ace, but we don't actually know what the top of that number looks like and what the bottom of that number looks like, and there would probably have to be a number of data requests and people compiling their data together to figure out what the top and bottom end of these spectrums look like. We also don't have information like the skill of the lobby, because that doesn't technically require personal data. It's not something that they necessarily have to provide. So there were a number of instances that Exclusive Ace spoke about where the lobby he played in, he performed pretty badly in terms of KD ratio, but he was still receiving boosts in skill because the lobby difficulty was substantially harder. And the final and slightly more elusive metric that I guess lots of people haven't even thought about is, what does Call of Duty quantify as skill? There are obvious things like KD ratio, how much you win a game, and a win-loss ratio, and a few other bits and pieces that most people would consider to be indicators of somebody who is highly skilled, but it has been known for a while now that Call of Duty operates a little bit differently. We're talking how much a player moves. Do they sit in a building for a particularly long time, or do they run around the map? How much general space they cover within a window of gameplay? Is their accuracy something they consider to be a high skill metric or a low skill metric? There are lots of things to consider here, and lots of things that kind of make this a little bit of a muddier picture. Now, generally speaking, if I was to take an educated guess, I'd say it'd be a combination of how much a player moves, their KD ratio, their win-loss ratio, and also just generally their success rates in the game. You know, do they get lots of kills? Do they survive particularly long in certain games like BRs? And do they end up winning those matches? But it's entirely plausible that there are more metrics associated with skill than we actually know about, and I wouldn't put it past Call of Duty to have some pretty intricate detail surrounding what does and doesn't classify as a skilled player. Now, I've done this process, and I will make a video on what it looks like when I receive my skill data, so make sure you subscribe for that, and we will showcase everything that's on show, but mine has come to a grinding halt. I believe it's probably a combination of lots of people applying, and possibly also the fact that my account has streamer mode that complicates that process just a little bit more. But what I find ultimately really quite fascinating about this is that this was enough in demand that an entire website failed. And on top of that, you know, this is something that has now become such a conversational point within Call of Duty that Call of Duty has felt the need to radically protect skill-based matchmaking. They've killed API datas in the past, they've taken out entire websites, they've recently patched 2 boxing methods, and have threatened bans for people who try to circumvent the matchmaking system, and it's a sword that they are willing to die on. Skill-based matchmaking is not going to change, it's something that they absolutely stand behind, and it's something that's considered to be a talking point in the rest of the gaming industry due to just how aggressive it is. Call of Duty's SBMM system, in my personal opinion, unless you're playing something like ranked Valorant or ranked CSGO, is very much in a league of its own in terms of unforgivingness. But thanks to the powers above, this is one area where Call of Duty's arm simply has to bend, and they actually have to provide this stuff because, legally speaking, they're required to. It's really only a matter of time before a number of people in the community start collating all of this data together to figure out what the actual spectrum for skill starts looking like, and figuring out how Call of Duty is coming to these conclusions. Regardless of skill-based matchmaking, and regardless of all of the skill data that's coming out, Call of Duty is finding itself in a really tricky spot right now, basically shedding a vast majority of its player base on Steam, which, whilst isn't the full picture, is definitely indicative of a retention problem where players are fed up of cheaters, fed up of audio issues, fed up of crashes, and it's safe to say that all of these are self-inflicted wounds. Modern Warfare 3, by the end of it, was actually in a pretty decent spot, and it really was the collapse of Black Ops 6 that has really started to cause some real fatigue across the franchise. I genuinely believe that if Call of Duty doesn't make huge strides to try and improve things by the time Verdansk releases, this game and this franchise could finally start seeing player losses that would probably send alarm bells ringing at Activision and its various investors and Xbox who are associated with it. So folks, I'm interested to see your thoughts and feelings on SBMM in the comment section below. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.